Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Sudaso, and this evening we'll be doing our weekly monk chat, an open Q&A session where you can ask any questions regarding Buddhism. So as long as it's not completely off the subject of Buddhism, I'll do my best to give a response. So feel free to type in questions in the comments window. I see there's already a few questions typed in. That's great. That'll get us off to a good start. So I'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the questions. And when I run out of questions, then we'll conclude the live stream. So if you want to keep going, keep typing in questions, and I'll do my best to reply. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. And hello to the people who have checked in online already. So hello to Vanessa, Kauser French, Lydia, Gregory, Ryan, Moraya, Gita, Richard, Kumu, Norma, and Maria, and anybody else who's watching. Welcome to all of you. And I see a few questions here. So let's start with the first one. Vanessa says, I was wondering if you have any advice on how to best cultivate mindful speech. Well, first off, I would say that the real question should be how to best cultivate right speech, because you can be mindful while using wrong speech. That's not so helpful. It can be a useful first step. So if your intention is to cultivate right speech, well, the first thing is actually to be aware of what you're saying, and aware of why you're saying it, and aware of what effect it's having on your mind and on the mind of the people around you. So I think the first thing is actually to remind yourself of how powerful speech is. And remind yourself of how powerful speech can be in cultivating wholesome or unwholesome mind states. How powerful speech can be in influencing the minds of others and influencing our own mind. It was, in fact, the Buddha's speeches that laid the foundation for the suttas that we have nowadays. So it was the Buddha's speech that led to all the Buddha Dhamma that we have access to. So first, recognizing that speech is, in fact, incredibly powerful. Speech is directly related to the thinking function of mind. In fact, there's a few places in the suttas where the Buddha directly connects mental activity with speech. So there's a connection in both directions, both when our mind is inclining in a certain direction, we're more likely to speak that way, but also when we speak in a way, then that will affect how our mind goes as well. So if we're using our speech in hostile or harsh ways, then our thinking will start to become more hostile and harsh. Whereas if we're using our speech in kind and gentle and loving ways, then our thinking will also become more kind and gentle and loving over time. So first, just acknowledging the importance of speech and the power of speech, and acknowledging that right speech is in fact one of the aspects of the Eightfold Path, and therefore an important thing for us to develop on the way to awakening. Then with that in mind, then I recommend actually reading the suttas where the Buddha talks about speech, how to use speech well and appropriately. One of the ones I find useful on this is the Anumana Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha gives a series of very useful recommendations about speech. And also some of the basic general principles that we find throughout the suttas. So the most basic thing is to always say what is true. So if we're not sure that something is true, then either don't say it or clarify. Rather than saying, this is true, you might say something like, I think this might be true, or I suspect this is true, or this could be true. So clarifying in that way. Or if you have an opinion about something, then be clear to say, this is my opinion, or this is my belief, rather than saying, this is true. So being clear about where our information is based upon. Is it actually a known fact, or is it something that we just think or believe or hope or wish is true? And the Buddha also said we should speak when it is beneficial. So we should be evaluating, is this actually going to be helpful? Is it going to be beneficial? And when we do speak, we should try to speak kindly and gently. We should try to make sure that our motivations are wholesome rather than based in any kind of negative or unwholesome motive. So those are a few general recommendations I would make regarding right speech. And Vanessa also said, I've recently learned that some teachers translate equanimity as inclusiveness. No, that's not what upekkha means. No. So she says, do you have any thoughts on this verbiage, especially how it relates to the Pali word of upekkha? Yeah, I mean, it's just not accurate. I mean, saying that equanimity has a quality of inclusiveness to it, that's okay. That's in the category of Dhamma talks. But as a translation of the word upekkha, inclusiveness is not correct. So upekkha, again, upekkha, the word literally means looking closely, but its applied meaning is a non-reactive awareness. So being clearly aware of what's happening, but without reacting, either with desire or aversion. That's what upekkha means. That does have an inclusive quality in that it's allowing the mind to include whatever's currently going on, because we're not rejecting anything. We're not trying to push anything out. So it's inclusive in that sense, that there's no aversion or rejection or resistance in the mind. But I wouldn't say that inclusiveness is the primary quality of upekkha, because it's not. The primary quality of upekkha is non-reactivity, not reacting with either desire or aversion. So if I were to use a word other than equanimity for upekkha, I might use non-reactivity or something like that, but I wouldn't use inclusiveness. But I would agree that inclusiveness is an aspect of practicing equanimity, because inclusiveness is indicating the non-resistance aspect. And Ryan says, what does it mean to be truly happy? Is it extinction of the asavas, or is it something else like equanimity or nibbana? Well, to be truly happy means to have a mind which has no dukkha. And in order to have a mind which has no dukkha, then the mind needs to be free of defilements. And in order for the mind to be free of defilements, it needs to be free of delusion. Which, in order to be free of delusion, one needs to relinquish all self-identity, which necessarily means awakening. Necessarily means the full realization of the Nibbana Dhatu. And that also naturally carries with it the culmination of equanimity. So there's the ordinary equanimity that we practice on a daily basis, which is training the mind to be less reactive. But true equanimity is the equanimity of the Arhat. The equanimity of someone whose mind is completely, permanently free of defilement, and therefore they are incapable of reacting with desire or aversion, because they don't have any desire or aversion. Those tendencies have been completely eliminated from the mind. So the rest of us practice equanimity, trying to train the mind to be less reactive, train the mind to be less prone to wanting and hating. But true equanimity is only found in the mind of the Arhat, because they're the ones who have completely eliminated all desire and aversion. And so your answers, extinction of the asavas, equanimity, nibbana, those are all correct answers. They're just pointing to different aspects of genuine happiness. Ryan says, a few months ago I had a dream where I was engulfed in bright light and waking up with glee. Recently I had 2 flashes of light in the same dream, which were quite striking. Are there any significance to this phenomena? No, no significance. Mariah says, what advice do you have for overcoming pathological levels of doubt, causing an endless cycle of wavering between choices and not committing? This is especially in regards to meditation and teachers. Well, I think that when making choices, the first question to ask yourself is one of these choices clearly more morally correct than the others? So for example, if it's a choice between killing and not killing, well, then it's really obvious. The morally correct choice is the not killing option. So if there's a clear moral quality to the choice, then you pick whichever is more moral. That's very simple. If there's not a clear moral quality to the choice, then just pick something at random because it doesn't really matter. Flip a coin if you have to. It really doesn't matter. So it's like, today, am I going to eat bread or rice? Who cares? Doesn't matter. There's no moral connotation to that choice, so just pick one. Flip a coin if you need something to help you pick between these. When it comes to meditation and teachers, well, as far as meditation goes, the way you practice is by trying things out and seeing what happens. So learn about some different ways of meditating and start trying them out and seeing what happens. In the beginning, it doesn't really matter what method you use. Because in the beginning, you realistically, 1, you don't have any clue what you're doing. 2, you don't have any clue what's going on. 3, you don't actually know how to meditate properly anyway. So in the beginning, it doesn't really matter what method you use, because basically any method, by engaging with that method, you'll start to learn a bit about your mind, and you'll start to learn a little bit about what obstructions you have to training the mind. And you'll start to learn a little bit about what your primary defilements and hindrances are. And you'll start to learn a little bit about what it's like to start deliberately directing the mind in one way or the other. So in the beginning, it doesn't really matter what method of meditation you use. You just kind of pick something at random and try it out and see what happens. And then after a while, maybe pick something else and try that out for a while and see what happens. And then something else and try that out for a while and see what happens. And in this process, you're constantly observing what happens when you use different methods. What happens when you use various methods with various conditions of mind as well. And gradually over time, you start to develop some experiential understanding of how different methods work and what methods work well for you and what maybe not so much. And you'll start to develop a repertoire of meditation skills. So, and then eventually you will start to figure out what methods are actually good for you in particular. And the guidance of experienced monastics can be helpful in this. So from time to time, going to experienced Buddhist monks and saying, this is what I've been doing in my meditation, this is what's been happening, do you have any advice? And listen to their advice, and it's probably a good idea to try it out, at least give it a shot, see if it helps. And so there also, choice doesn't actually really matter that much, because just pick something and try it out and see what happens. And in the process, you develop wisdom. As for teachers, again, there's a few major critical things, which is when evaluating a teacher, you first need to read the suttas. You need to know what the Buddha said. And once you know what the Buddha said, then you'll know what teachers are teaching in line with the Buddha and which ones aren't. If you never read the suttas, then you'll just never know what teachers are teaching the Buddha Dhamma and what teachers are teaching something different. So your first priority should be reading the suttas, so you actually are capable of evaluating teachers. The next major thing is morality. So if somebody says they're a Buddhist teacher, but they're going out and drinking alcohol and sleeping with their students, then I would recommend staying far away from that person. Because the basic foundation of Buddhist practice is morality. So if somebody can't even keep the 5 precepts, then I wouldn't trust anything they have to say about Buddhism. So the ideal is of course, monks, Buddhist monastics, These are usually the people who are the most reliable when it comes to looking for Buddhist teachers. And even then, you want to see who actually has an upstanding level of virtue, who has a genuine, visible dedication to the Buddha Dhamma, who seems to have a good knowledge of the Buddhist teachings. And again, according to the suttas, not according to random teachers they've heard here and there, but who actually is talking about the same Dhamma that we find in the suttas. This also can be useful. Okay, and we have a question from Ayasobana. Hello, Ayasobana. Thank you for adding some questions. So Ayasobana says, what are the aramanas for samadhi in Samyutta Nikaya 34.5? This is in the Jhana Vagga, Samyutta Nikaya 34. Oh boy, I'm going to have to bring up Sutta Central and look at this. Let's see. So, Samyutta Nikaya 34.5, supports for samadhi. Well, actually, this is interesting here. So Bhante Sujato translates aramana as support. So he translates samadhisming aramana kusala as skilled in the supports for immersion, so supports for samadhi. Yeah, aramana meaning support or basis. These are valid translations. So yeah, translating it as supports or basis of samadhi. So Ayasobana says, does it mean that we should learn to grasp the meditation object for samadhi, or is it referring to the supporting conditions for samadhi? Yeah, I would say supporting conditions. That seems to make the most sense here, because the Buddha says one is skilled in samadhi, but not in the supports for samadhi. So again, this indicates that there's two different things here. So the actual skill of holding the mind on a meditation object would seem to be skill in samadhi, whereas understanding what supportive conditions support the development of samadhi would be a separate skill. So it's understanding how to live in a way that supports samadhi. Just an example is I've met a number of particularly lay people over the years, but also some monks, but mostly lay people who during retreats, they're capable of getting quite good samadhi. But when they're not in retreat, they're not capable of getting good samadhi, and they don't understand why. And it's exactly this. They have skill in samadhi, which is why they're able to get good concentration during retreat time, but they don't have skill in understanding supportive conditions for samadhi. So when they're not in retreat, so when they're outside of a artificially created supportive environment, then because they don't understand supporting conditions for samadhi, they don't create supporting conditions in their life. They live and act in ways which generate agitation of mind or dullness of mind, or which inflame the defilements and hindrances in various ways. So that even though they have the skill of samadhi, because they don't have supportive conditions, then they're not able to enter samadhi outside of retreat time. So I actually do think that Bhante Sujato's translation here is accurate, translating aramana as support rather than as object. And Ayasobana has further statements. She says, for context, the other factors in the Jhana Vagga are being skilled in attaining samapatti kusala, remaining titi kusala, emerging vuttana kusala, and maintaining suitable conditions, kaleta kusala. Yeah. Yeah, again, I think that again emphasizes that skill in supporting factors in aramana is something other than the actual skill of maintaining samadhi. Because the skill of entering and maintaining samadhi are listed as two separate things. So taking aramana as support or basis in the sense of the other conditions in one's life that support good samadhi practice. I think that does make a lot of sense here. Okay. And Tim says, I picked up a chant at a Saturday evening session a few months ago. May all beings be, presumably may all beings be happy. I've been saying it daily. Oh, that's not actually a question, it's just a comment. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, keep it up. Yeah, keep practicing loving kindness in that way. It's very useful. Kumo says, could you please explain Saddha Vimutti? I think it was mentioned either in the Badali Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 65 or 64. Saddha Vimutti, liberated by faith? That doesn't sound right. Let me see, Majjhima Nikaya 64, 65. Oh, it is listed here, okay. Okay, so it's mentioned it is in the Badali Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 65, mentioned Panya Vimutti, but not Cheto Vimutti. Yes, I'm looking at it now here. So the Buddha mentions a list of different kinds of well-attained practitioners. So the first one is Ubato Bhaga Vimutto, the one who is liberated in both ways. The one who is Panya Vimutto, so liberated by wisdom. The one who is Kaya Sakti, which means literally means a body witness, but it's translated here as direct witness or personal witness, would be another way of saying that. Ditthipatto means attained to view. Saddhavamutto means liberated by faith. Dhammanusari, follower of the Dhamma, and Saddhanusari means follower by faith. So these are all examples of people who have made progress on the path. So the first couple of these are talking about people who are arhants. So Ubato Bhagava Mutto means somebody who is fully enlightened and also has practiced all of the samadhi attainments. So all 4 jhanas, but also the 4 incorporeal attainments beyond the 4th jhana. So they're called liberated in both ways because they're both liberated by the cultivation of wisdom, the wisdom which sees the non-self characteristic of all things, but also liberated in the sense that they've trained the mind to let go of all physical phenomena through samadhi practice. Then Panyavamutto is one who is liberated by wisdom. So this is an arhat who doesn't have the 4 incorporeal samadhis, but still they're fully enlightened through relinquishment of self-identity. Then you have Kaya Sakti. Kaya Sakti is somebody who has developed the higher samadhi attainments, but haven't necessarily become an arhat yet. So they're not necessarily fully enlightened yet, but they have developed the incorporeal samadhi states. Ditthipatto, one attained to view. I was talking about that this morning. The one attained to view is a word for a stream enterer, someone who has cultivated right view to the point where they've reached the first stage of awakening. Saddhavamutto, by the location of this, I would probably say that's referring also to a stream enterer, a stream enterer whose path was based more on faith. Rather than on cultivating right view. Instead, it was on faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, because there's a few major characteristics of a stream enterer. So one of them is, in fact, the attainment of right view. So clearly saying that body and mind are non-self. Another aspect of a stream enterer is perfect faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So this might then be talking about 2 different varieties of stream enterer. Ditthipatto meaning one who's become a stream enterer through the wisdom side, so through focusing on cultivating right view. And Saddhavamutto, one who's become a stream enterer through faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, leading to unshakable faith. And that correlates then with the next two examples, so Dhammanusari and Saddhanusari. These are two kinds of practitioners who are not yet stream enterers, but are on the path to stream entry. So the Dhammanusari is the one who is following the Dhamma. Their main way of making progress in the path is through studying the Dhamma, understanding the Dhamma, applying the Dhamma, so developing the wisdom faculty through study and investigation of the Dhamma. And the other one is the Saddhanusari, one whose path is based upon faith. It's drawn by this strong faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, which then gives them the inspiration and motivation to practice with diligence and sincerity. So then that naturally seems to connect then, that the Dhammanusari, the Dhamma follower, then becomes Ditthipatto, one who has attained stream entry through right view. And the Saddhanusari, the faith follower, then becomes Saddhavimutto, one who is a stream enterer by way of faith. So that's what I would guess this is talking about. Okay. Then Ryan has a question. Ryan says, when practicing breath meditation, the breath became sweet in a couple of occasions. Is this normal or imagined? Well, I mean, your experience is your experience. If your breath felt sweet, then it felt sweet. Does it mean anything? No. Nope. Yeah, I wouldn't put any importance on it. The important thing is, are you cultivating mindfulness and equanimity? And is the mind becoming steady and clear? That's the important thing. Tim says, what is meant by investigation? I hear that term used a lot. Well, different teachers will use it in different ways. When I hear the word investigation, I immediately think of the term Dhamma-vichaya, which is one of the 7 factors of awakening. So the word vichaya is often translated as investigation or analysis. So Dhamma-vichaya then is investigation or analysis of one's experiences in accordance with the Dhamma. For example, to cultivate the recognition of impermanence, to investigate or observe or analyze the impermanent aspect of our experience, or the investigation of dukkha, recognizing the unsatisfactory aspect of our experience, or anatta, recognizing the impersonal, the non-self aspect of our experience. So this can take an intellectual form of actually using one's intellect to think about these things. Again, maybe reading passages from the suttas on the subject and thinking about it and contemplating it, and then thinking about how that is observable in one's life, how it manifests in one's experience. Or it can be experiential in terms of actually trying to directly feel anicca, dukkha, anatta, trying to directly feel the non-persistent aspect of all sensation, of all aspects of our experience, for example. And Tim says, is there an order to read the suttas? I have read the Dhammapada. I usually recommend to first read the Majjhima Nikaya cover to cover. Don't skip anything. The only recommendation I make is to start with Sutta number 2. And after you've read through to the end, then go back and read Sutta number 1. Just because the first sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya is a little bit difficult to understand if you don't already have a good basis in the suttas. So start with Sutta number 2, read all the way through to the end, and then go back and read Sutta number 1. So Majjhima Nikaya. Then next, I recommend reading either the Samyutta Nikaya or the Anguttara Nikaya. Doesn't really matter which one you read next. And then after you've read those 2, then read the 4 short poetry collections of the Buddha, which includes the Dhammapada, Udana, Etivuttaka, and Suttanipata. Then, at that point, you can go and read the Digha Nikaya, and you might also read the Theragatha and Therigatha, which aren't technically words of the Buddha, but it's from the Buddhist disciples, and it's quite good as well. I will say regarding the Dhammapada that the Dhammapada is much more profound than it looks at first glance, but you don't really understand that until you've read a lot of the other suttas. So when you go back and read the Dhammapada again after having read all the other suttas, then you'll have a much deeper understanding and a much deeper appreciation of it. So Joseph has a quote from Udana 2.8. Maybe Joe, if you send us an email, then we can add that to the list of sutta study topics, and we'll go through that in a future sutta live stream. Gregory says, I'm sometimes asked about Buddhism. What is a simple summary of the goal and path of Buddhism that would be appropriate for people unfamiliar with Buddhism? What should and should not be mentioned? So I would usually recommend just starting with the absolute basics. So Buddhism is about training the mind to reach unconditional happiness and a clear understanding of reality. That's it. So Buddhism is based on the recognition that most people are unhappy. Most people experience some amount of dissatisfaction and discontent, but that there's a way of training the mind in order to overcome that. And Buddhism is also based on the recognition that most people are delusional, and that there's a way of training the mind to overcome that as well. And so then Buddhist practice is about training the mind so it can be perfectly happy all the time, no matter what. And also so it has a clear, undistorted recognition of reality all the time. And we do that through practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, which involves morality, meditation, and also study and contemplation. So that's what should be mentioned. Let's see, what should not be mentioned for someone unfamiliar to Buddhism? Asubha practice. People unfamiliar to Buddhism tend to find Asubha practice very weird and usually pretty off-putting. So I don't usually recommend leading with that topic. And Jojo seems to be listing another sutta for discussion. Let us see. Okay, Ryan says, are you familiar with who Venerable Dhammabuddha Mahatera was? The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know, I'm not really familiar. So Jojo says, in Anguttara Nikaya 10.2, what is the virtue that is required to access meditation? I don't think the sutta says 5 precepts. Doesn't mean 10 wholesome actions or what. Let me pull up that sutta briefly. So AN 10.2. Let's see. There seems to be a different discourse than the one you're mentioning. So you said 10.2 volition, but this has 10.2. The name here is Chetana Karaniya, which means, well, actually, you could translate that volition as well. So one develops the samadhi that leads to, so one develops the virtue that leads to samadhi. Yeah, so it's just talking about cultivating morality. So morality in Buddhism is fundamentally based upon kindness and consideration. The 5 precepts are examples of that. The 10 wholesome actions are examples of that. But the basic principle of sila is kindness and consideration with body, speech, and mind. And that naturally then supports the development of samadhi. Joseph says, would you kindly share an example of an act of kindness that you are grateful to have given, received, or witnessed in the holy life? Yeah, every time somebody gives me food on alms round. It's absolutely mind-blowing. A complete stranger walks up to some shaven-headed religious weirdo on the streets and gives them free food. It's just absolutely beautiful. And that's the last question. So if there's no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and conclude at this time. So a bit of a short monk chat this evening. So we'll go ahead and finish the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.